Today I wanted to touch the topic that affects me personally. A few days ago, on May 18, Ukraine marked the Remembrance Day for the victim of genocide of the Crimean Tatar people, and together with the international community commemorated victims of the deportation. In May of 1944, the NKVD, predecessor of KGB, deported more than 191,000 Tatars from Crimean Peninsula. According to the Tatar sources, the figure was 423,000. Approximately 8,000 people were killed during the transport. In general, from 27 to 46% of population of Crimean Tatars died in the first years after the resettlement. Early in the morning of May 18, soldiers forcibly entered the homes of Tatars, announcing immediate deportation for massive collaboration to their astonished and incredulous residents. Within 4 days, the entire local Crimean Tatar population was collected in cattle cars and transported to Uzbekistan. Dirty and cold wagons were packed with people. No provision, no warm clothes. They were forced to gather and leave quickly by military. The conditions of the transfer by train were also unbearable. Many of them died, especially as most of the deportees were women, children, and old people. The weakest ones were taken away by starvation, thirst, cold, overcrowding, and diseases that spread rapidly in packed train carriages. The lack of accommodation, food, and adaptation to new climatic conditions had a heavy impact on the people upon arrival to the place of their exile. Meanwhile, the Soviet authorities confiscated from Tatars 80,000 of their houses, 360 acres of land, and 40,000 tons of agricultural products. New residents, mostly Russian citizens, were brought to the peninsula instead. The authorities took not only the lives of Tatars, they tried to erase memory of them, Russifying original toponyms and destroying monuments and cemeteries. This is the policy of totalitarianism. Totalitarian state where human lives have no value. This is what we call genocide. The worst thing that there are hardly any ethnic group on the territory of former USSR that would not have suffered such repressions. If I wanted to tell you the story of each of them, I wouldn't have to try so hard. Just take the history of Crimean Tatars and replace them with Ukrainians, Poles, Lithuanians, Belarusians, Greeks, Finns, you name it. Russia was always the prison of nation, and USSR is just one of its many ugly faces. In total, about 6 million people were affected by forced displacement, and between 1 and 1.5 million died. I am descendant of those people. It's hard to believe how similar the stories of ethnic Koreans and Crimean Tatars are. The similarity is not just in details, they are almost identical. Koreans were forcibly displaced a little earlier though, in 1937. This time, the excuse was concern about possible collaboration with Japanese. I remember the stories my grandmother would tell me when I was a kid, and I used to think they were just scary tales. The same thing, they were awakened early in the morning, ordered to gather their belongings within a couple of hours. This meant they took nothing with them, and some even left the rice on the stove that was still cooking. The disgusting thing was that before they had the chance to leave, their neighbors, the Russians, were already fighting over their property. I imagine they ate that rice too. Next, there were the same overcrowded cattle cars, starvation, disease, and death. The road from Soviet Russia's Far East to Central Asia took about 2 months. Throughout the journey, at hundreds of small stations, the train would sometimes stop for weeks and sometimes for 5 minutes. I remember finding funny, for some reason, stories about Koreans, how they would run out of trains, swarm confused station merchants, and simply take whatever food they could see. What would you do if your child or mother were dying from starvation? I remember the heartbreaking stories of parents giving away the wrapped bodies of their infants at these stations, begging strangers to bury their children somewhere. They had to do it because the train was stopping only for 5 minutes, and they didn't even have the time to say their last goodbye.